Okay, so let's start today's class. Last time we saw some probabilistic estimates, how to do some estimates in the terms of some sampling and what we could do from those. And today we will see our first example where we'll try to count something in much smaller space than what we can count in general. And so this is a very classical algorithm from 80s called probabilistic counting and Morris counter. So let's start with that, okay? So just recall that we are working in a streaming model and the objects are coming in the stream or tokens are coming in stream, and we have limited memory to keep these objects. And at the end of this, we would like to compute a function, okay? And we saw last time that token could be either numbers, some packets, some edges in a graph, some point in some feature space, or each token could be row or column of a matrix. Okay, so what is our question? And we also talked about the various trade-offs between memory size, accuracy, randomness, and other source. So the question which we'll be today interested in is the most simplest streaming question, and the question is, how many events are there in the stream? Okay, so you have streams coming from E1. Let's say here your algorithm, and here your stream E1, E2, dot 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 En, and all I want to know how many objects or how many items, objects. Okay, so that's all that we are interested in. So today, this is the question which we will be interested in. How many events are there in the stream? So this is the most basic question that we can think of in algorithm. Okay, so so what's an obvious answer? A counter that increments on seeing each new item will require how much? Roughly log n bits to be able to count up to an event. So in this lecture, we will be worrying about the number of bits as our space requirement. Okay. Okay. And what do you think? If I want an exact value and deterministic, can we do better? What do you think? Anybody?
It sounds a bit hard, Saket, but
no, you should distinguish n.
Yes. Yes, Piotr. So this is exactly. So we'll just formalize in a next slide, and the question is, well, not deterministically because of the following reasons, right? So if your algorithm uses fn bits to store the integer n, and then there are 2 power fn configuration for these bits, right? So in order for the algorithm to be able to store exact value of all integers up to n, the number of configuration must be greater than or equal to the number n. And then you get the 2 power fn should be greater than or equal to n, and hence the number of bits that you need is like log n, right? So just by a simple counting argument, it says that we need at least log n bits, okay? So this is our first lower bound proof, that if we are trying to count deterministically, right, then this. But suppose if I ask you, I don't give you randomization, but I say, hey, deterministically, can you give me an estimate, like, fine, not n, but can you give me an estimate of like n by 2? Can you do substantially better than log n? So like, I'm happy if you tell me that, well, so say n tilde is my estimate, okay? And I'm happy if you tell me that, okay, well, n tilde is at least n over 2. So this is like a factor 2 approximation, right? Can we do substantially better than log n bits?
If you store the log, does it work?
Yeah, but so when I say asymptotically better by log n, do you think you can take, say, log n by log n bits, for example? Do you understand my question? So suppose I'm happy to give you, I'm happy if you can give me a constant factor approximation, say factor 2. But I can only allow you, say, log n by log n bits. Do you think we can make this proof, a counting proof, go through? Okay. At least not something which is very obvious, but eventually we will show this. We need a little bit of hard work, but it is basically a counting argument which will say that for any constant factor approximation, you cannot do better than omega log n bits. Okay.
What happens if okay? So if you keep just every second, you don't save log n, right? But what happens if you so the further you go, the slower you're doing updates? So like in some arithmetic progression or even geometric progression.
Oh, you're trying to get some exact approximation?
No, approximate, yeah, exact approximation, yeah. But now you're saying it's impossible. Okay, that's.
Yeah, I mean, we will be able to prove it that this proof can be made to work in this, but you're all there, and we'll get there in a minute. But just deterministically what to do is a little bit unclear, but we'll get there. Okay, so I'll give you an intuition in a minute of. So for now, let's just believe that we cannot do log n bits. So deterministically, we cannot beat log n bits because of this simple proof that you have to distinguish between all numbers from 1 to n. So the number of configuration must be greater than or equal to n, and then you must need log n bits. Okay. Okay. But here's a paper from 1978 by Robert Morris, who said that if we allow both randomization and approximation, then we can do. Okay. So in this course, you will see several lower bounds where we will show that not only deterministically it is not possible, but even if you combine deterministic as well as approximation, you cannot do much better. Okay. But if you allow approximation as well as randomization, then you can achieve quite a lot. Okay. So today we will see one such example of this paradigm. Okay, and I will give you a proof for many of the things which we will come that both both approximation and determinism is not of any use. So let me give you an intuition of why we are able to do, and then we will make a formalization of this intuition. Okay, so all of us agreed that obviously that counter that increments of seeing each new items will take log n bits, and my question is, say, for example, let's fix 255 events and 8-bit register. I want to count more than 255 events, but by an 8-bit register. Okay? Any idea? Of course, as I told you, we will allow both approximation and randomization. Okay? So here's a very simple strategy to do that. Let's count only every other event. Okay? You understand what my strategy is? I don't want to count every event, but I want to count first, then the third, then the fifth, then the seventh, and the ninth, and at the end say, okay, it's 2 times this. Okay? But what is the issue with this? What is an issue with this algorithm?
If you do it deterministically, then you need 1 bit to say if you counted the last one or not, so you don't gain anything.
Exactly. Right? Then you are using 9 bits. Right? So if you're trying to do deterministically, then as William points out, then you have to remember whether the last number was counted or no, or not. So basically you have a bit here which tells us whether we have counted the last number or not. If it is 1, we have counted, but then total number of bits which you used is 8 plus 1, 9 bits. That's like cheating. Okay, so we are only forced to have 8 bits. Okay, so what can you do? I want to implement this idea, count only every other event. How can I do that?
Toss a coin.
Exactly. Let's just toss a coin. So here's our algorithm. So we have to do this in a streaming setting, right? So in the streaming setting, what I do, flip a coin at every event to decide whether or not to add to the counter X, right? So what I mean by this, I just toss a coin. If comes head, I increment X to X plus 1. Okay? Is the algorithm clear, right? So at every point of time, we just draw a fair coin, and if it comes head, I increment my counter by 1, right? But now this is a randomized algorithm. Agreed?
But you need a bit to toss a coin?
You just believe that you have that for free. Okay? Because, yeah, so that will be far too less than what we will eventually achieve. So for now, just believe that you have you have a unlimited access of coins, okay, from the algorithm. Okay, so we will not worry about those. Okay, you will very soon that those number of coins if we need is way too less than what we are able to count. Okay, William? Okay, so for now, let's believe that this is what we do. At every point of time, if we get ahead, we increment. Now you have to ask yourself, what is an expectation of X? Right? Is n by 2. So what should you output? 2x. Am I right? Okay. So I know that expectation of x is n by 2. So what I do, that I have an x which counts basically half the number of times, and I output 2x. Okay. And I hope that this is a good estimate. This is a n tilde 2x is a good estimate. This is our belief. Now we have to prove that this is really the truth. Right? Okay. So now, first of all, let me introduce my first terminology. This is what is called unbiased estimator. Okay. So 2x is an unbiased estimator, meaning expectation of your random variable is equal to the object you want to count. Okay. So this is exactly right. So what is an expectation of 2x is n, right? And this is what we wanted to count, number of events. So in this case, these kind of random variables are called unbiased estimator. There is no bias in this estimator. Okay. Any question? So if you have any question until now, please ask, because this will set us going forward.
So when we are outputting 2x,
Yes.
aren't we increasing the amount of space that we are using for this multiplication?
Well, so imagine that you have so this is like a post-processing, right? Post-processing, right? I mean, I will give you an x, okay? You as a person know how to multiply with 2 times x, okay? Like this is not something which, so like think of this, that my memory location, I give you my memory location, and the person who has this access to x will multiply it and will have this. Look, this is a very simple example. So 1 bit also starts to matter, but very soon it will not matter. Okay. I can give you, so for example, how will I give you? So for now, I can give you, like, it's a belief that, okay, I'm only going to do a factor x. So I will only return you x, right? So, or I will return you 2x as a number, right? So you're right. Even to output 2x, I need a bigger number, right? But how to say this? Okay. Okay. So for now, let's believe that we have a work tape which we don't count. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And very soon you will see that work tape will be much, much smaller compared to, say, the number of items anyway. Okay. So for now, let's just not get into how do we output and how many bits we do. But you're right. One should be careful about those things too. Okay. But this is my toy example, and I'm only working with 8 bits. So asymptotically, these things are like really becoming very difficult. So all I want to do with this example is to introduce all the set of ideas which is there in this algorithm, right? So I should have been a bit more careful. You're right. Okay, but just take this as on the face value just to understand the basic ideas of the algorithm. Okay, so the first thing which we need is an unbiased estimator, which was correct, 2x. Now, so this is something which we always need to. So whenever we are doing counting or something, the question one that we need to answer is we need to find an unbiased estimator, or sometimes an almost unbiased estimator is also a good approximation to the object of our interest. Okay? Okay, so this is something to remember. Okay, but what we want to say the value returned by 2x is close to n, like the real number of events with high probability. Expectation is good, but we want that we are able to tell you this, that this is number like with very good probability. Otherwise, like if we are too far away from the real event, right, then that's not what we want, right? We would like this to happen with very good probability. Okay, so let's try to understand. And so the moment you want to estimate these kind of bound, we need tail inequalities. So the first tail inequalities we have learned is Markov. So what does Markov will tell us? Let's try to understand that. So Markov tells that probability that x is greater than t times expectation is at most 1 over t. So if I set t equal to 1, right? So all I'm saying that what is the probability that x is greater than, say, n over 2, right? Is like, so more than, say, what is the probability that x is greater than or equal to n by 2 is like 1, right? But say if I wanted, but we were interested in, what we are interested in is the probability that 2x, right, is greater than or equal to, say, n, right? This is what we are interested in. Now, suppose if I wanted a 10% error, 10% error. So what are we interested in? What is the probability that 2x is greater than 1.1? But this is less than or equal to 1 divided by 1.1. Right? So this is like a very low, this is very high probability. You understand the point? right? So for example, if I was looking, so this is like if we wanted to have a 10% error, okay? If I wanted to have a 10% error, then all I can say that I succeed, like I have 10% error with probability actually less than some very small quantity, because 1 by 1.1 is actually close to 1, okay? And so for example, if I wanted to say that, okay, my 2x is, what is the probability that 2x is greater than or equal to 2n, then I could have probably said that, well, with 50% chance that I will return some number which is less than or equal to 2n. But there's another problem with Markov's inequality is that it only tells us how far away we are, like only one side of, so this is my expectation, which is like n. It only tells us how far away this kind of probability. So this is what it counts. This is what it counts. Right? This is what it counts. But we would like that, well, you don't vary too much from your expectation within some range. Okay? So now, if that is the case, then what is the only inequality we, at this point of time, we can try is Chebyshov. But for that, I need to compute variance. Okay? And I need to compute, let's see. Okay? So what is my variance? Okay? My expectation of x is n by 2. And so expectation of 2x is n. And what is the variance? So if you recall, what was variance of x? Is nothing but, look, at each time we are doing one coin toss. So basically these coin tosses are independent. So variance of x, which is variance of summation of xi, is equal to summation of variance of xi, which is equal to each of the variances. How much? It's basically variance of xi is expectation of xi square minus expectation of xi whole square. So expectation of xi square is basically xi takes either 0 or 1, and it takes 0 and 1 with probability 1. So xi square takes 1 with probability quarter, probability half, and this guy takes with probability half. So this is 1/4. So this is 1/4. Right? So if I do this, what do I get? I get that variance of xi is equal to n over 4. But what are we interested in? But we are interested in variance of 2x, right? Which is nothing but a square variance of x. So it is like 4 times n over 4, which is n. Okay? Now that we have all these things computed, now we can apply Chebyshov and see what happens, right? So variance of x is in general np into 1 minus p. So that is n by 4. You could have also computed this. And the standard deviation is like square root n over 2. So in our case, so suppose now for an example, say n is 400. Okay. So my mu is 200 for x. My variance is 100, right? It is n over 4, right? So 400 by 4 is 100. And sigma of x is like square root n over 2. So my n is like 400, so it is like 20 by 2, so 10. Now let's set t equal to 2. Then what are we getting? Probability that 2x minus 2 mu is greater than, is 2 times standard deviation, is nothing but probability 2x minus 400 is like 2 into 20 is less than or equal to quarter. Okay. So what is the meaning of this in English? It means that 75% of the time, the number of events estimated from 2x is within 40 of the actual count. And what is this? This is an error of 10%, right? So not once or twice, but 75% of the time, you're going to return an estimate which is within error of 10%. Okay? Any question? Okay. So now let's try to understand what is the limitation of Chebyshev. Okay. So I set up the same thing. Now my number is 400. My mu is like expectation for 2x is 400, variance is 400, and standard deviation is 20. Now suppose I want error to be 5%, right? Which is like within 20 of the actual count, which basically means that you have to set t equal to 1, right? So probability that 2x minus 400, like, because this is the formula, right? If you see, this is the formula, right? Y minus c, t times this is less than equal to 1 over t square, right? So now what am I setting here? So let's just set here. So y is like 2x, expectation of y is 400, and I want 5% error. So what I want, what do I mean by 5% error? So if my total number of object is 400, what is 5%? Is 20, because 10% is 40. So now I want my error to be like not more than within 10%, right? So it's like 1 by 20. So it's like 1 comma 1, which is like, does it tell you anything meaningful? So, because typically what you want is that the value which you are returning is really like within 1%, within 2%, within 5%, okay? But looks like Chebyshev, after some point of time, cannot give you an error, the success probability, which is close to whatever you expect or whatever you want. In other words, if you give me an error control by your parameter epsilon, then I cannot say that probability this is greater than equal to epsilon times something, just may not be good enough. Okay, so there's a limitation to also doing Chebyshev. Okay, so the second question which we would like to address in this lecture is how do we control error with good confidence? And when I say good confidence, with good probability. So look, all these are just telling us that, well, it is beyond your threshold with probability at most 1. It conveys nothing. If you have told, oh, this is at most 1/10, then I know that 90% of the time I am within the range which I wanted to output. Okay, any question? Okay. So how can we count more than 255 events in 8-bit counter? Right? So we saw that we can actually count 512 events. So it should be 250, right? Now I ask you a question. Can we count more than 512 events? Can we come up with an estimator which will help us count more than 512 events? Anybody?
Well, I guess it depends on what is the accuracy you want, no? I mean,
for now, forget about accuracy. I just want a good estimator.
Take bias coin, which put 1 with probability 1 over 4.
Okay, so you're right. So this is what I should do. You're right. You put a bias coin P at every event to decide whether or not to add to the counter X. Okay. So the number of events then you are able to count is expectation is going to be Pn, right? So if we output X by P, then that's an unbiased estimator, right? So for example, if I put P equal to 1/3, right? Then what will be X by P is like 3n, right? If I put P equal to 1/1000, then I'm able to count up to 1000n, right? So I could choose any value of P, and in expectation, if I return X by P, then that forms an unbiased estimator. So now we know we have an unlimited source of unbiased estimator. It's just that we need to have an unbiased coin. So we need to have a biased coin with probability P, right? Okay. So the question is, what is the limit to this? Okay. So if you notice, this works perfectly fine when we want to have some constant multiple of n, right? Right, just as an unbiased estimator, okay? So here is our general scheme. We want to keep some value in X, probabilistically update in each step, and finally return some f of X. Am I right? So for example, here it was just like X by P was your function of X, right? So here it was just function of X was X divided by P, right? But is there any reason for us to believe that this is how we should be doing, right? So if I want to minimize the number of bits and maximize the number of objects that I want to count, I would like to come up with an X and f of X such that X is still a good estimator, and f of X will give me f of X is a good estimator. F of X is an unbiased estimator. Okay. Okay. So at least is the idea is clear what we are trying to do. See what we did. First, we took a very simple thing. Let's count alternatively, and we made that as a probabilistically. How? By saying that look, every time you toss a coin and you increment the counter. Then we generalize this to any biased coin P, and that will give you a P, like that will be able to count more and more objects, right? Now, ideally, it would have been very nice if, so for example, if I would have told you, okay, so if I gave you log n bits, okay, or let's say n is like some q square, okay, some q square. Can we do this or let's say okay, fine. So up until now this was fine. Can we do, say, in 8-bit 2 8 whole square? So can we do 2 to the power 16 in 8-bit register?
Saket?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Like, I don't know whether it's a good idea to, like, why we are taking with the same probability, with the increasing with the same probability P. Instead of that, if we increase the counter with probability 1 by X, not sure whether it's going to help or not.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So in
no.
the first, when the first number comes, I increase with probability 1.
Yes.
Then when the second number comes, I increase with probability 1.
You can do anything, Aritra.
Yeah.
The point is, could we prove that whatever you are doing as a counter, X is precisely what you wanted to count?
Yeah, so the point is, why I'm trying to do is,
okay,
what I'm trying to do is that I think the expectation should be close to log n, then report 2 to the power x.
okay.
But I need a precise calculation for that, for the claim. I think it's...
Yeah, so we will do something of this nature in this.
Okay, yeah, so please go ahead. Let's see.
Okay, so all I'm trying to tell you, there are various functions of x and f of x. Up until now, what we have done is that, like, we didn't care about what x was. We had our own p and we did everything. But maybe as we go forward, we can also take stock of what is there in x and based on that decide our probability, right? So if you recall our first reservoir sampling, what was doing? X was keeping, like, when I was getting a jth item, I was replacing it with probability 1 over j. So it was not a fixed probability. It was like a biased probability, or it was a probability which depended on the current value of my counter. Okay. So all of you are right. So this is what we will try to go towards a real counter. So what X will store is the log of the number of events. Okay. So Excel is like log base 2 n plus 1. And you can ask, why am I doing n plus 1? Because I would like X0 to be 0, right? When there are no items, and that is why when I put n equal to 0, log base 2 1 is 0. Okay, so that is it. Now suppose this is what I want to store. Now there are several questions. Okay, now why it is interesting? So if value of log suffers from a given absolute error, okay, so for example, what I mean that suppose X is storing, say there are some n items, and it is storing, say, log n minus some delta. Okay, so this is like some sort of absolute error that it is storing. But if you look at the so this is like absolute error. But if you look at the number of events, this is like a relative error. And what I mean by relative error is, let's see. Let me see what I mean by relative error. Okay, so let's try to understand what I mean by relative error. So relative error is basically delta n by n. So like actual, this is actual, and this is error. So now if I had log n minus delta, so it is like 2 to the, so my actual number which I'm storing is 2 to the power log n minus delta. So my absolute error is like delta. So you're going to store something like 2 power delta by n, right? So this is like some constant fraction of your actual value, right? And this is what I mean by that, what the absolute error in logarithmic will translate into a relative error for the actual number of objects that we want to keep. Okay? So this is why log is interesting, or log is important. But the more difficult question is, how do we increment X? Right? You should remember that X is a counter. What is X? Is a counter. So what does X stores? Integer. Okay. So look at what we did with 2x, right? With some probability, you incremented the counter by 1, right? So the question is, okay, so this is our desire. This is what I want to store. Now I want to have a way to increment this counter. Okay. So suppose my current estimate is like nx is like 2x minus 1. And I arrive, some new item has come. What would I like? I'd like X to store log base 2 to power X plus 1. This is what ideally I would like to store. But the problem, as I said, that this quantity may not be integer. Okay. So what is the one normal approach to do this is like you either truncate this number or you round it. But if you are going to do this every time, you are going to incur a huge amount of error. So this is not a very good strategy, right? Do you see that every time if you see and you go and increment by 1, I mean, more or less, I mean, this X itself will be like not log, but it might be close to n. And then if you take 2 power that, so these two numbers will be far too away from each other. Okay. So this is why we need to have a interesting or different strategy to increment this X. And here is what Maurice came up with, not me. So he thinks of X as K plus F. K is an integer and F is some number between 0 and 1. Okay. And what does he does? So he either keeps K or K plus 1 as the new value of X with appropriately chosen probability. Okay. Okay. And so also he needs to choose this P in a way that X is an unbiased estimator. Okay. So is the algorithm clear to all of you, right? I will tell the algorithm properly, but this is an intuition. What are we trying to do? We will keep x as some k plus f, where f will be some number between 0 and 1. And we will either keep k or k plus 1 as the new value of f with appropriately chosen p, so that x is an unbiased estimator. Okay? Okay. So I hope I have given you good enough intuition of how probabilistically, incrementing the counter could lead us to very nice unbiased estimator, and we could use that to give an estimate on the number of objects. Now, there are several things. The several things is how close to correct estimate we are, what is the probability of this, so we saw that Chernoff doesn't look like giving everything, how can we improve those, and that is what we will see in the next set of lectures, like in the next half of the lecture. So this is a good time to ask question. Okay, so if there is no question, here's my algorithm. Okay, so now let me start with an unbiased estimator for counting events. Okay, so here's my algorithm. Okay, so toss a biased coin that is heads with probability 1 over 2x. If coin turns of head, x is like x plus 1 and while, and we will output 2 power x minus 1 as the estimator of the length of the string. Okay, this is my algorithm. So let's see what happens. So initially x is 0. Now first item comes. I'm going to toss a biased coin with probability how much? 1 over 2 power 0, which is equal to 1. So definitely x becomes 1. But when the second object comes, what happens? Now x, the value is 1. So I'm going to toss a coin with probability half. And with probability half, I do this. Okay. Now, with probability half, I would have incremented this to this. Okay. So on an average, let's ask yourself, on an average, after how many times like you will be incrementing this? So 1 over the probability. So roughly after 2 times, right? Okay, so think that only the second time you're going to do. So you did this second time, okay? Now, let's say third item. So now suppose, okay? So let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? So up to 3 we have done something, and suppose it is correct. So when what happens is that with so you have taken this probability like 1 over 2 power something, and you have equally divided among this, and that is why like on an average 1 over 2 to the power that in that you're going to increment the counter. So this is what is happening intuitively. Okay, so it's like think of like a bucket. Okay, so the another way of looking, at least the way I view it, okay, is the following. Okay, so this is just for your intuition. Okay, so here your 2 power 0, here is 2 power 1, here is 2 power 2, here is 2 power 3, here is 2 power 4. Okay, so now what you do, between this you make that many finer equality, so that okay, between here you will have another set of finer, like the probability will be proportional to the number of items here, so that what happens, the chances that like how many times will you need so that you will increment the counter by 1, it will be proportional to this length. Okay, so think, so if ideally would have been what I would have done, so ideally I would have what I would have done to the counter is that okay, don't increase, don't increase, don't increase, now increase, don't increase, don't increase, don't increase, don't increase, now increase, don't increase, don't increase, don't, so and so on and so forth. But this is what is happening, but this is happening probabilistically, that so, and then we believe that okay, we will be able to show that more or less this is exactly what is happening in this probabilistic counting algorithm. Okay, so is the intuition clear, right? And think what is beautiful here. So for example, if I wanted to get a half approximation, all I needed to care about which bucket I falls in. If I knew which buckets I fall in, then if I output one of these guys, then I'm giving you number with a factor 2 approximation. Okay? So this is just for your intuition. Okay? So what is actually happening in this algorithm, right? So for a lot of time, the probability, a lot of time between this, you look at the difference between number, and each time you are incrementing the counter with probability 1 over, like proportional to the numbers here, which means how many times will I do, after how many times will I increment the counter? 1 over that p, which is the number of steps here. Okay, is the intuition clear? Anybody? Any question? Okay. If not, let's go forward. So what is an intuition? Intuition is X keeps track of log n in a probabilistic sense, and hence we will need order log n bits, right? If value of X is like something like log n, then how many bits do I need to represent that X? Something like order log n bits. Now, first thing we need to show that if y is like 2 power x, then expectation of y minus 1 is n, the number of events seen, right? Then this is like showing that our estimator is an unbiased estimator, right? So if I show this theorem, then we would have shown that our estimator is good. It's an unbiased estimator. Okay, so let's try to show this. Okay, but before that, let's get into this log n versus log n. So Morris had 8-bit register. Okay, I just read the paper today. It had an 8-bit register, but he needed to, and at those times even 16-bit registers were available. Okay, but he needed to count far too many different objects. So having a 16-bit register for many of those things were extremely costly, and it seemed very infeasible for him. Okay, so all he could afford is like this 8-bit counters. Okay, and he was also not very much interested in exact counting. He was very happy with a crude statistics from this. So now, if you have 8 bits, you can only count roughly like 256 events. But now notice, if you have log n bits, then how much can you count? 2 power 2 power 2 power 8, which is like 2 power 256. That's a huge number. Okay, so in his paper, he does things a bit differently because of his overhead and error control, etc. Morris was able to report counting up to 130,000 or 130,000 events using just 8 bits while controlling the error. Okay, so which is quite a big success, seeing the fact that he was doing all this in 1978. Okay, so this is just a 2-page paper. So if you want to see more details, you should go and look at this paper. It's very nice, very cute. Okay, so now, so this is the difference between log n and log n, right? With log n, you can only count 256. With log n bits, you can count 2 to the power 256, which I don't know what it is actually. Okay, so first let's do an analysis of our expectation, and like let's prove that it is an unbiased estimator. So we are going to prove this using induction on n, right? So notice that for I greater than or equal to 0, xi is a counter value after I events. And what is yi? 2 power xi. And both of these are random variables. Okay, and I'm going to show inductively the following. For all I greater than or equal to 0, expectation of yi is equal to I plus 1. Okay, so if I show this, then am I done? Because then what is an expectation of yn is n plus 1. But what are we returning? We are returning 2 power x minus n, 2 power x minus 1. So if 2 power x has value n plus 1, then we are returning n, right? So if I can show to you that e of yi is I plus 1, then we will be good. Let me see. Yes. Okay. The writing. Okay. So, and we'll try our with induction. Okay. So what is our base case, right? So n equal to 0 or 1. So what was our x0? What did we put? 0. And what was y0? Is 2 power x0, which is 1. Right? Now, let's look at x1. What was x1? It was a deterministic, right? Because for x1, what the first item came, we tossed our coin with probability 2 x0. x0 was 0, so 2 power 0 is 0, 1. So x1 is equal to 1, right? This is deterministic, right? So there's nothing expectation here. And if the moment x1 equal to 1, what is yi is like 2 times x1, which is like x1 is 1, so which is 2, which is 1 plus 1, right? So base case holds. Agreed? Okay? Okay. Okay. So now let's try to do this. So our whole goal is to show expectation of yi is equal to I plus 1. So now suppose for all I less than n, expectation of yi is equal to I plus 1. So suppose this is true. Okay. Now I'm going to show you for expectation of yn. So what is an expectation of yn? Is nothing but by definition expectation of 2xn. Okay. Now let's just write it down. Right? What are the possible values of xn are? Right? We don't know, right? Xn was number of events. So number of events could be anything. So it is j equal to 0 to infinity, 2 power j probability of xj being j. Agreed? Wait. Probability xn equal to j. Agreed? Okay. Now let's ask ourselves. Okay. So what is the probability that xn equal? This is what we want to compute. Let's ask ourselves what happens. What is the probability that xn equal to j? Okay. Two things can happen. Either xn minus 1 is equal to j, okay, and we do not increment counter, or xn minus 1 is equal to j minus 1 and we increment counter, right? These are the two possibilities, right? So how can we say this then? Then this is equal to summation j equal to 0 to infinity 2 power j. Now I'm going to change this. This is same as saying probability xn minus 1 equal to j, and we do not increment the counter. So what is the probability that we do not increment the counter? Is 1 minus 1 over 2 power j. Okay, very good. Or probability that xn minus 1 is equal to j minus 1 and we increment the counter. So we increment counter with what probability? Anybody? One over?
2 to the j.
No.
Minus 1.
Exactly. Because you look at the counter and this. Okay. So this is a mistake which I did today morning. Okay. And I spent 1 hour understanding that why this number is not coming what I wanted. Okay. Then I realized this. So this is why, okay, this is important to not make these kind of mistakes. Okay. Okay. So it is 2 of j minus 1. Okay. now that we have this, okay, so this is important that it is incremented with this. So now let's just do this computation. So it is summation j equal to 0 to infinity, okay, and I'm just going to expand this out, okay. So I'm going to expand this out, then what I'm going to get, 2 power j probability xn minus 1 equal to j. So this is the first quantity I'm going to get. And notice, if I take 2 power j and 2 power j minus 1, then I'm going to get 2 times this. And yeah, and this and this will get cancelled. So what I mean by this, so what are we going to get from here is, if I understand correctly, so minus summation j equal to 0 to infinity, right? 2 power j gets cancelled, right? Probability xn minus 1 equal to j, right? From here. And now this and this will get cancelled. So you will get plus 2 times summation j equal to 0 to infinity, j equal to infinity, probability xn minus 1 equal to j minus 1. Okay, I have just expanded this, everything, right? So 2 power j, this into this, 2 power j, this and this gives us this, 2 power j and this gives us this. Okay, now what I will try to do is try to see these two things. But what is this quantity? Can you tell me what is this quantity? This is nothing but expectation of, right? By definition. Okay. Now let's try to understand these two terms. So this is equal to expectation of, let me write it down, otherwise I will make a mistake. Okay. And now from the previous side, we had summation j equal to 0 to infinity 2 times, okay, probability xn minus 1 equal to j minus 1 minus probability xn minus 1 equal to j, right? I just clubbed this together, see? So I just moved 2 inside this and I just put this minus this, okay? Right? So this is this. Now notice, let's try to understand what is these terms are. So if you notice, I claim that this terms corresponds to summation expectation x to xn minus 1, and what this term corresponds to, summation j equal to 0 to infinity probability xn minus 1 equal to j. This is what it corresponds to. Why? Let's just look, every time it is twice this. So they will start cancelling out each other. For example, if I just write down the first few terms, so let's see what happens. If I write down the first few terms, what is this? J equal to 0. So xn minus 1 is negative, is like, so what are you going to get here? So first two terms will be probability xn minus 1 equal to minus 1, and then minus probability xn minus 1, this is 2 times, xn minus 1 is equal to 0. Then you write plus 2 times probability xn minus 1 is equal to 0 minus probability xn minus 1 is equal to 1. Again you write 2 times probability xn minus 1 is equal to 1, minus probability xn minus 1 is equal to 2. So this term is 0, so forget it. Okay, this term is 0, so forget it. Now we have 2 times probability xn minus 1 equal to 0 and this. So one term is left here. We have xn minus 1 twice and 1 negative, so one term is left here. Okay, so this is why you can, from these two, I can write this. Okay. Okay. So now, but what is an expectation of 2xn minus 1 by induction hypothesis? What is this? This is equal to n minus 1 plus 1, because this is what our induction hypothesis was. Okay. And now, what is this term? Well, xn minus 1 will take some value, right? Either equal to 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So what is this term? What is this term equal to? Anybody? What is this term equal to? It's just a probability distribution. You're right. So this is plus 1. So what did we get? We will get n plus 1. And isn't this what we were hoping to get? Right? So we have shown using induction that expectation of this object is n plus 1. Okay? Any more question? And see, I did that for you, and this is what is written in the slide. So if you don't trust me, you can go and read this yourself. Okay? So it is just written in a proper way. I just thought that if I do it, you might understand. So we applied induction. Here we said, well, what is the reason that xn can become equal to z? Either this or that. So we wrote down that, and then we just did everything. Okay. Okay, so now we can start our lecture again. So just to remind what we did, we defined a random variable, or we defined a counter, right? We defined a counter which we used biased coin to turn this up, like by +1, and we showed that the counter is correct in the sense that it is an unbiased estimator. It does give the number which we want. Okay, and so that is what this expectation analysis told us. Okay, but now we need to worry about how good is this estimator. But before that, look, what we analyze is 2 power x, right? But what we are storing is x. Okay, now we need somehow expectation on x, because that is what is actually our registrar, that is what is our counter is. Okay, and in general it is not very easy to get a bound on expectations from x to 2x and all this, like in general for 2 functions. But when the functions are very well behaved, we can do this. And a real valued function f r to r is called convex. So basically you should always think of a convex function like, let's see. Okay, so generally the way I draw them is like, think of them as something which is growing very fast. Okay, and what is the convex function tells us? That basically tells us that if you take 2 points, say a, and here it is your f of a, and here it is b, f of b. Okay, then it tells us that for any value in between, or basically if you draw a line between them, okay, then the function value is below the straight line between f of and fa. Or in other words, if you take any other point in between, okay, then the value which it takes, some f of c, is less than equal to f of a plus f of b by 2. Of course, there's also a function like the definition in terms of lambda, but the way to remember is this. And in general, most functions which are generally the convex functions are extremely fast growing functions like x square or parabola or something of this nature. Okay, and so this is what means of and what Jensen's inequality tells us that, look, this is what we will use. So I have not proved Jensen's inequality, but it is there in any standard textbook on probability, that if Z is a random variable and its expectation is finite, okay, then if F is convex, then F of expectation of Z is less than equal to expectation of F of Z. So as I said, like F is a very fast growing function. So expectation is also like, what is expectation gives you? Expectation is like a mean. So we expect that at that value, the F will be less than expectation. Okay, but this is standard thing. You will find it in any textbook. So I will not go about it. You can find in the book which we are prescribed for our course, that MCMU book. You can find it there. Okay, so for now, let's just believe this for a fact. Okay, so now let's see what is an implication for this to our counter size. Okay, so my yn is 2 power xn, and my function 2 power z is convex. I mean, it's a very fast growing function, and most fast growing functions are convex, and 2 power z is definitely a fast growing function. I mean, if you really want to prove it yourself, that's fine. Okay, now I would like to, what is our goal? Our goal is to get an estimate on expectation of xn. Okay, so now what is the random variable I'm going to say? I've said, let's say our random variable is xn, and my function is this. So what does Jensen's inequality tells us? That f of expectation of z is less than equal to expectation of f of z, right? Okay, so what is the f of expectation of xn? This is what we know by Jensen inequality, is less than equal to expectation of f of xn. Am I right? This is what, just by Jensen's inequality. And this is very powerful inequality, and it is used everywhere, and it helps you. So what is f of e of xn? F of xn is like 2 power z. So this is equal to 2 to the power e of xn, which is less than equal to, but what is f of xn? Is expectation of 2 power xn. And we computed this just now, right? What was expectation of 2 power xn? Is n plus 1, right? So now if you equate this and this, what have we got? Expectation of xn is less than equal to log base 2 n plus 1. Okay. So what is an expected size of our counter? Expected size of our counter is log n plus 1. This is the expected size. So how many bits do I need to keep this counter? Log of log. And this is why we get order log log. Okay, any question? Right? So we have shown both that. So remember, right? Something you returned. And now we have shown that expected size of our counter is just like log n plus, is like log n, and hence the number of bits required to keep this counter is order log log n. Okay? Okay. Okay. Now we have to do our variance calculation. So now the question is a random variable yn well behaved? It means, is it very close to its mean? Or like, will I be returning close to the actual value or close to its expectation most times, or it is going to vary from each other quite high? Okay, so to do that, we need to compute variance. And it turns out for this, the formula for variance is really very pretty. Okay, so what is the formula of variance of yn? If you recall, the formula of variance of yn is going to be expectation of yn squared minus expectation of yn whole square. Okay, Now, I'm not going to prove this to you, but again, using induction, you can show that expectation of yn square is this pretty number. Okay, then this is like 3 by 2 n squared plus 3 by 2 n plus 1 and minus. And what was the expectation of yn? What was the expectation of yn? Is n plus 1, right? So this is like n plus 1 whole square. And if you do this subtraction, you will get this number, n into n minus 1 over 2. Okay? Okay. So all I did not do is the computing expectation of yn whole square, but it is, okay, again, using induction, you can do this, but it's easy. I mean, it is very precisely like more or less exactly like what we did for expectation analysis. Okay, so I'll leave it there. So please look at the slides. Okay, until unless you really want me to tell, then I can go through this, but it is not particularly very insightful or useful. But what is interesting is that you really get a very nice closed formula for this. Okay. 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 But let's set up what we are trying to understand. So now I want to do an error analysis with Chebyshev inequality. So what we have computed, expectation of yn is n. Okay. Variance is n into n minus 1, 2. And now what would I get if I apply Chebyshev here? Okay. So what does it says? Probability that yn, this random variable, vary. So what is this tells us? So let's just draw this picture. What is my expectation? Expectation is n here. And it says, look, how far away from your expectation are, like this side and this side, is less than equal to 1 by 2t square. Now, suppose if I ask myself that how far away you are from, say I say t equal to 5, right? So what I'm saying, look, how far away you are from, say, 6n, right? This is what it means, right? Yn minus Eyn is like n. What is like if I set t equal to 6n? What is the probability that I'm here? I'm here. That is going to be less than equal to 1 over t is like 6, so 72. But this is not what we would like ourselves to be, right? I mean, I want to be very close to, like, say, what happens if I say, look, I want to be within, say, n plus n over 3, n minus n over 3. What is the probability of this? Right? So what is Tn then? Is n over 3, right? So then T is 1 over 3 in this case, right? T is like 1 over 3. If I wanted to within this range, like, what is the probability that I'm between n plus n by 3 and n minus n by 3, right? Or even if I do 10% probability, which is like n minus n by 10 and n plus n by 10, then what will I get if I put t equal to 1 by 3? Right? Do you get anything useful? So let's see. 1 over 2 times 1 over 9, which is 9 over 2. Is it useful? Are we getting any useful information about closure to its mean from Chebyshev? Anybody? Even to have a less than equal to, and forget about this. I mean, even if I put, even if I put t equal to 2, or say t equal to 1, then it is like half, right? So like t equal to 1 means like, okay, what is the probability that you are between n and 2n, right? then it is less than half. But if I get slightly closer to n, like this doesn't give me anything for even 30% error. Like n by 3 is like a 30% error. It gives me absolutely nothing. So doing with Chebyshev analysis is not going to be useful. So here is the next trick which I would like to introduce. Okay. So what is our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is that you give me an epsilon, okay, and I want to estimate to have an error at most epsilon n, okay, with say constant probability or with probability at least 1 minus delta for a given delta greater than 0. But for now, say with constant probability, right? Look, I want to make only 10% error. I want to make 5% error, right? And the question is, okay, you have given me an epsilon, okay? So epsilon you give, like adversary give, okay? And now I have to come up with a analysis such that I will tell you the probability that you are not too far, like you are within the range of epsilon here, like n minus epsilon n, n plus epsilon n. This range is with very good probability. Or in other words, I want to bound the probability of being here or being there with some constant. Okay, I say greater than this is at most this. So probability that you belong here is at least this. This is what I would like to do, right? In fact, I would like to, so this is what is called error, and this delta where I said, no, not only that, I want to achieve that I'm within this range epsilon with very high confidence, then you have this delta, okay? So this is, one thing is called error, other is called confidence. So for now, we only want a constant factor confidence, okay? Let's see. So a natural question is then, how do we improve our estimators, okay? So here are some very simple, well-known tricks, but let me set up what I mean by estimates, okay? So setting is, we want to compute some real value function f of a given input I. Then I define the notion of probabilistic estimator, which is basically a randomized algorithm that given an I outputs a random answer x such that expectation of x is close to f of I. And if the expectation of x is exactly equal to fi, then estimator is called exact, or it is called unbiased estimator. Okay? And what is an additive approximation? We say, look, this is my exact value, right? And this is my expected value, right? They are within epsilon of each other, right? Or in other words, so expectation of, yeah, so they are like, this is like within epsilon of each other. Okay, and what is a multiplicative approximation? That this should not be there. That expectation of x is 1 plus epsilon times the real value within 1 minus epsilon f of I and within 1 plus epsilon f of I. Okay, so these two are different things, right? Here I'm saying, look, expectation minus f of this should be something. Okay. So here it is like, if you write down this, what does this tells us? That expectation of x is less than equal to f of I plus epsilon. Here it is f of I minus epsilon. But here we are saying, so this is why it is called additive approximation. But here, well, it is multiplicative, like 1 minus epsilon times f of I, 1 plus epsilon times f of I. Okay, these are called multiplicative approximation. So, as I told you, estimator only gives expectation, and bounds on variance allow Chebyshev. But sometimes we can also apply Chernow, but now we will see how can we improve this estimator just by applying Chebyshev, by doing what is called repetition trick. Okay, so this is something called variance reduction. So first we will do reduced variance via averaging. Okay, so the reason why, if you apply Chebyshev, what is the reason why we get such bad thing is because your variance is high. So if I can reduce the variance, okay, then I will be able to get something better. And that is what we are trying to do by parallel repetition or averaging. So what you do H parallel copies of algorithm with independent randomness. So basically, you remember, so now I will not have one counter, okay, but I will have several counters, Y1, Y2, YH, right? So I have a parallel copy. So these are my counters, okay? And every time a new entry comes, I go and increment each of these guys, okay? But what I'm going to output, I'm going to sum these numbers and divide by H, okay? So this is my new estimator. So first of all, is it an unbiased estimator? Well, what is an expectation of ZH? It's a linearity of expectation. So 1 over H, right? 1 over H, summation I going from 1 to H, expectation of Yi, right? Okay. Now, what was an expectation of Yi? It was n plus 1, right? So what is this number? This number is n plus 1 times H divided by H. It is equal to n plus 1. So great. This is also an unbiased estimator. Which is great for us, right? So now, what I'm going to return. So before I returned just only, I kept one sample and returned it. Now I kept H samples, took the average and returned that. And it turns out that even this estimator is an unbiased estimator for the quantity which we had in our head. Okay? Okay, any question? Okay, and these are independent. Like, so for everyone you're doing independent coin toss. It's not that, so what I mean by this, when a guy came for Y1, you make one coin toss. If it came head, you increase it. For Y2, you had another coin toss, you went and did this. YH, another coin toss, and you went this. So recall now, before we had this issue of how will we do this coin tosses. But look, this is like some extra 1 or 2 bits of spaces. So the regime we are now in, few bits here and there wouldn't matter much to us. Okay, so this is nice. Okay, but what is the variance? Okay, so all of you should recall variance of Z is summation. Suppose Z is summation Zi. It is variance of Zi if Zi's are independent. Okay. Okay. And variance of Az is A square variance of Z. Okay. Now, I knew what was the variance of each Zi was, right? Didn't we know? We knew the variance of Zi was n into n minus 1 by 2, right? So what are we getting? We are getting H times n into n minus 1 divided by 2. But now we have 1 by H also. So that will come and that will give us a factor of 1 by H square. So this H and this H will get cancelled and this is what we'll get, right? So this is how we can compute variance of ZH, okay? But now some magic has happened, okay? Now, let's ask ourselves the following question. What happens if I had 2 over epsilon square copies of H? Then by Chebyshев, what can we say? Right? Then by Chebyshef, what can we say? Right? So if you recall correctly, so the formula of Chebyshev says probability x minus Ex is greater than equal to some A is less than equal to variance of X divided by A square. Okay, very nice. So now for us, A is like epsilon n. And what is my variance of x? Variance of zh is 1 over h into n minus 1 by 2. Okay, so here, but now let's write it down in terms of this. Okay, so this is going to be 1 by h n into n minus 1 divided by 2 divided by, what is a for us? Is epsilon n. So epsilon square n square. Okay, but what is h? Is 2 over epsilon square. So h is like 2 over epsilon square. So what are we getting? We are getting 1. So we are getting 2 over epsilon square. So we are getting epsilon square by 2. And this n into n minus 1 by 2 is roughly n square. Okay, by another 2 here, epsilon square, n square. So n square will get cancelled, epsilon square will get cancelled, and you get 1/4. Okay? So did we achieve what we hoped for? Right? So now, if we take h copies and take its median, then what are we able to get? We are able to get that we can come very close to, so you told me how close you wanted. So now I can be here with probability how much? At least 3/4, because this probability and this probability is bounded by 1/4, 1/4. So the probability that you are centered around epsilon n, like within n minus epsilon n and n plus epsilon n, is at least 3/4. Okay? Good. Any question? Okay. Okay. But how much space do we need now? We need to run h copies, right? So for each counter, we need log n bits. So now we are using some order like 2 over epsilon square. So like 1 over epsilon square bits of the counter. Okay. So now we have increased the space, but we have reduced, we have reduced the error probability, like error in the sense error in the estimator. But the question still is, so let's just write down here. So we would like to do further error reduction. So for h equal to 2 over epsilon square, we were able to show that ZH, which was like sum of these compounds, but this. But we wanted that, suppose we want that ZH is also less than equal to delta, where delta is something which you give. Or basically we want to say that, well, we are going to give you the estimate here between n minus epsilon n and n plus epsilon n with probability 1 minus delta. So I want to have a confidence close to delta. So, right? So, do you think using Chebyshov we can do something? Can we further reduce the error? Anybody? Okay. So,
as long as delta is a fixed constant, we can do it, right? Like by setting a different value of h.
Yeah. So I want h as a function of epsilon and delta.
Yes. Yeah.
You're right. So can you come up with a function of epsilon and delta for h? Okay. So here is something which seems to work. Okay. So let's set h equal to 1 over 2 times epsilon square delta. Okay. Then if you look at the computation which we did before, nothing would change here, right? So let's just write down whatever we wrote here. So we wrote here was 1 over h, right? So it was variance. So variance was n into n minus 1 by 2. This was our variance, divided by epsilon square n square. Now that we have chosen what did we choose? We chose, say, okay, so let's go that other side. So we had 1 over h, this is my variance, n into n minus 1 by 2 divided by epsilon square n square. Now let's see what is this when I substitute this. So what are we going to get? We are going to get n into n minus 1 by 4 epsilon square, right? No, it is 1 by h. Yeah, so it is 4 by epsilon square delta. Am I making something correct? Yeah, so nothing is cancelling. Okay, let's see. No, this is 1 over h, right? So it is, okay, this is where the mistake is. Okay, this is where the mistake is. Okay. So this is 1 over h. So what are we going to get? We are going to get 2 epsilon square delta times n into n minus 1 by 2 epsilon square n square. 2 will get cancelled, epsilon will get, right? So this is like delta. So this is exactly what you wanted, right? So if you set h equal to 1 over 2 epsilon square delta, then we can do this. But how much space does this take? Okay, how much space does this take? Let's say, so this is going to take you roughly 1 over 2 times epsilon square delta time log n. And well, if you want epsilon to be, say, 10% error, right? Like 1 over 10, right? 10% error, like epsilon equal to, say, 10% error, and delta equal to, say, half. Even then, this is really, really bad, okay? This is really bad. So the question is, do you think we will be able to improve the dependence on delta? We don't know how to improve the dependence on epsilon, but can we improve the dependence on delta? Okay, so you see, like delta dependence is quite high at this point of time. And what we would like to do, that can we get a better dependence on delta, okay? And to do this, I will introduce a new idea, which is called, will repeat independently C log 1 delta times, okay? But what? Okay, this is a more important question. What are we going to repeat? So let's call ZH. How did we make ZH? Right? It was by Y1 to YH. Okay? Okay. So now we will have something called compound estimates. Okay? So now what will we do is the following. So here, what was ZH? So let me write it down. What was Z1 of H? So Z1 of H was consisting of Y1, say Y11, YH1, okay? And then you took the median. So now I will make ZH2, which is like again 2YH2 dot 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 some Z something, okay? Okay, so some Z, say delta, Z delta H, Y12. So what I'm saying is that I'm going to get I'm going to get several estimates where each estimate itself was formed of a cumulative estimate, okay? So let's call this is, okay, you get my point? So I'm going to get these guys, okay, but not too many times. I'm only going to repeat C log 1 delta times, okay? So now notice how many counters have I kept. So your delta is like C log 1 over delta, right? And for each of them, I'm going to keep some, say, okay, say let's keep 2 over epsilon square, okay? So the total number of space I'm going to take is like, so look, each ZHI is consisting of 2 over epsilon square estimator. Z2H is another 2 over epsilon square estimator. So basically you have kept enough estimators. This forms your Z1H by taking the average. You take this, you make another average. You take this, you make another average, so on and so forth. But how many? Something like C log n 1 delta times. And now, what do we know? We know that with some good probability that some of the counters, like, or the many counters are epsilon n close to n. It's just that we do not know which counter is close to epsilon n. Okay? So what we will do, rather than outputting which counter, we are going to sort these numbers and return the median of them. Okay? So what is our algorithm do? So so look, each of Z1 is basically average of counters. Okay? What is Z2? Some average of counter. What is ZH? Is an average of some counter. So this is how you have got some L counters. Okay? What is L counter? Each counter is an average of some 1 over epsilon square counters. And now I have got some numbers. From these numbers, I'm going to return a median. Okay? So basically you sort them and you take the middle number. Okay? So this is my algorithm. So do you understand the algorithm before we do the do the analysis? Okay? Now you will see why are we doing median trick, because now it will allow us to apply Chernoff bound. Okay. So what is our goal? So let Z be the median of so many independent estimators. And I want to say that probability that mod Z prime minus n is greater than or equal to epsilon n is less than or equal to delta. If I show this, then I know that whatever estimator I have returned, the median, is within n minus epsilon n and n plus epsilon n with probability 1 minus delta. And I have used how many estimators? So look, I have L meta estimators. So think of this as a L meta estimator. So each ZI are meta estimators. And each meta estimator consisted of 1 over epsilon square normal estimator. Okay? So a picture by, if you think, here it is. So 1 over epsilon square estimator gave us Z1. Another 1 over epsilon square estimator gave me Z2. Another 1 over epsilon square estimator gave us ZL. And what is Z prime? Is just you take the, sort them and take median. Okay? Okay. Now, okay? So this is what, so I want to prove to you that probability that Z prime minus n is greater than or equal to epsilon n is less than or equal to delta. Okay? How do we go about proving this? Okay? So here is, I'm going to set up something. So let AI be the event that estimates Zi is bad. That is probability that Zi minus n is greater than epsilon n. Okay? So this is what I mean that estimate is bad. What is it? That this is, yeah, like that Zi minus n. So look at the estimate of Zi. It is in the red zone. Okay? Okay. So then it is called bad. So what is the probability that AI is less than or equal to 1 by, so what is the probability that AI is bad? So what did we apply? What was the property of each Zi? So when you apply each Zi with 1 over epsilon square estimator, then you know that individually each of them using Chebyshev is upper bounded by their up from their median with probability 1/4. So what is the probability that AI is bad, right? Is less than 1/4. So how many bad estimators are there? At most L by 4 by, okay, I'll give you, it's like just by applying normal indicator random variable. Oh, okay. We will show that it is upper bounded by L over 4. Okay. So let's try to understand for median estimates to be bad, what happens. So let's draw a picture. Okay. So here's a picture. Okay. And this is a trick which is useful every time. So this is our n, this is our n minus epsilon n, and this is a n plus epsilon. And this is our estimate. So some estimate fall here, some estimate fall here, some estimate fall here, some estimate fall here, and some estimate fall here, here, right? Okay. And I'm asking, okay, so what is the probability for median estimate to be bad, like median? I'm saying that the number of red colors should be more than half. Why? Because look, so these are estimates which are less than this. So if this is less than, if this estimate is less than, say, L by 2, then if you sort them, you will definitely end up here, right? Okay. So, or let's say not, I think that's not the right way of saying this. What I want to say that the number of bad estimates, okay, number of bad estimates, like the one, okay. So this will be bad only if this to be bad, you must be the case that these two guys are bad. You get my point? So if more than these guys are half of them are bad, look, more than half of them are bad, that doesn't mean that I will not get a median estimate. But it is possible that if more than half of them are bad, in the sense that almost all of them are here, then, and half of them are here already, this side, right? Then if I sort them, I go, I will only end up here. I will never get into the green guys, right? So, but it could be that half of them are bad, but n by 4 are here, like some of them are here and some of them are here. So when I sort them, I go here. But definitely when I say half of them are bad, I'm also counting all those events where I can make a mistake, right? So, or in other words, to make a mistake, AI must be like more than half of AI have to be bad. Why? Because I'm just going to do sorting. So if I come from here to here, you must have seen half the guys or a bad estimates to be here. Now, all I need to show is that what is the probability that half the guys are bad? If I can read, like, bound that error probability, we will be done. And we are almost done now. So we will use Chernoff bounds to bound the probability of bad median to be at most some 2 power minus C prime L for some constant C prime. And how do we go about doing this? Is as follows. So let AI be the event that estimates Zi is bad. Okay. So let's set up a random variable. What is this? Let Wi be an indicator random variable that is 1 if AI is bad estimator, right? Okay. So what is an expectation of W is summation I Wi. Okay. Because look, these were independent estimator. So I can just do this. Now, what is the probability that one of them is bad? It's like it is 1 and 0. So it takes 1 with something like 1 over. So expectation of W is actually less than equal to L over 4 if there are L. So now we just saw that for median estimate to be bad, more than half of AIs have to be bad, which means probability that W is greater than equal to L by 2 is less than equal to. So this is my expectation. What is the probability that, this is my bad. This is not correct. This should be greater than equal to, right? So it should be, look, I want to be more than L by 2. It means this is my expectation, L by, this is my, what was my expectation? Yeah. So, okay, I think I made a mistake here. Okay. So what I mean to say is that, so L by 4 is my expectation. And what I wanted, yeah, this is fine. I want, what is the chance that I'm more than L by 2? It means I'm deviating from my expectation by L by 4. Okay. So, yeah, so here it shouldn't be half. It should be just 1. It shouldn't be half. This should be 1. And then you can apply using Chernoff bound, you can get some function of this. For example, I would like to apply this. Okay, so here it is greater than or equal to, and here it is 1. Okay, and if you set up these things here, x is like w, mu is like L by 4, delta is 1, right? Yeah, so delta is 1. Then what will you get here? You will get 2e minus delta is 1, so that doesn't count. And what is mu? Mu is L over 4, so L over 12. Okay, and what you want this to be 2e L over 12 to be less than or equal to delta. So if you check this, so what is this? 2 by delta should be less than or equal to E L over 12. Okay, so L should be just greater than or equal to log 2 over delta, right? So if you had L of this, you can reduce the error probability to this. So you can do it using Chebyshev also, but by doing this grouping trick or by median trick, you can reduce the number of samples you need to log 1 over delta. Okay, so what we have seen that using variance reduction and median trick with order 1 over epsilon log 1 delta log n bits, one can estimate 1 minus epsilon factor estimate of the number of events with probability 1 minus delta. And in fact, one can do much better by changing algorithm and slightly better analysis. I will put that in the homework as well as a reference, is that you don't try to do 2 power x, but you do it with some other probability. Okay, so just to recap what we did today. So here's a simple strategy for sampling based streaming algorithm. So first thing is you set up a random variable x, which is an unbiased estimator if e of x is a function that we want to compute. So this is one thing. And secondly, what you did is that you parallelly repeat to reduce variance. So if we are looking for an epsilon delta approximation, what is the meaning of this? That probability that we are epsilon close to our expectation with probability at least 1 minus delta. So this is, and to do this, we can just repeat the process several times, and that will allow you to reduce the variance. Okay, but this, and if you wanted this, it will take you 1 over epsilon square delta many times, and you take average. But the linear dependence on the failure probability, but we can get it to logarithmic by, as I told you. So you run order log 1 by delta independent copies of previous algorithm with parameter what? Epsilon is same, but delta equal to 1 by third. And this is why we batch them together to make a meta estimator, which was average estimator. We took bunch of meta estimators and we took its median to reduce the space even further, leading to this quantity. Okay, I think there are some further improvement even on epsilon square. I think this is just preprint by Jelani Nelson and one of his co-author, but I haven't seen this. So this is all that I wanted to tell you. So I have taught you an algorithm and I have introduced 3 things: unbiased estimator, parallel repetition to reduce variance, and a median trick to reduce the number of counters that we need. Any more questions? Because then else we are done for the today.
Yes. So how you prove the optimality of such type of algorithms?
Oh, you mean dependence on 1 over epsilon and 1 over delta?
Yes. So there are any low bounds?
Yes, there are some lower bounds for some of these things, and some of them use some interesting relation to some communication complexity and this, and we will see some of these things in the course, like not all, but one or two such things.
Okay. Okay.
But look, it's something very amazing, right? That the way to think of these algorithms are like, you give me how much error you want, and you give me the confidence with which you want your randomized algorithm to succeed. And I'm just asking you, oh, then I need that many samples. And these samples are independent on number of vertices.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we will see several such examples of like this whole process. So this is why I just tried to make this algorithm into these three parts. Okay? Okay. Any more questions? Okay. If there are no more questions, then thanks to all of you.